Welcome to the Worldbuilders Anvil, episode 238, Roman Death Rituals, broken down for world builders.
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the Worldbuilders Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the muck of Java and build. Welcome back. As always,
I'm so glad that I thought to come up with this show topic.
The show notes are extensive, too. You can tell that Michael did it because the show notes are extensive.
It's actually totally not. All Jeff's idea. This one's all Jeff, but I love that he did it on a death rite thing since, to be perfectly honest, I wasn't 100% thrilled with how the deep dive death rite episode came out.
I didn't think it was a deep dive enough, which is probably fair because I try to cover death rites in general, and so I want to cover the types of death rites to think about, but that's not really a deep dive. So
yeah, I'm more capable of so much better. So I love that you did. I love that this was the next one.
And I figure we should probably do 2 death rites in a row after teasing the audience about death rites for so long.
What are you doing? Would you introduce yourself? Gosh, you're throwing the show off track right off the rip.
I tried. My name is Michael Miller. I'm Jeff Ingram. I'm sorry.
Isn't it Jeffrey?
I don't really care what people call me. I always sign Jeffrey W. Ingram.
Poof poof. I'm going to call you Poof Poof from now on.
That's fine. I don't care. You can call me your little poofy dingies, and whatever. If it makes you feel happy. I've been called basically everything already. So
and death rightfully yours. I am Michael Miller.
Yes. And so today the idea of the episode is I want to go kind of into the rhythm of the Roman death rite. It's kind of cool. And the reason I picked it is one, there's some things that probably still exist today, or we have sort of things that have evolved from it. But there are some definite differences too. So people, I think, will be able to ground to it. It's a more sophisticated ritual. Some people have very simple, like it's kind of you prepare the body and dump it somewhere. So this one, there's a bit more to it, but it gives you lots of different areas that you can think about that you might want to or not want to cover, plus some possible inspiration of like, I like this idea. Let me take this one idea. There's like one I really like in here, and I'll point out when I get to it. But I really, but you could just like grab onto that nugget and say, let me spring out a whole other ritual from the one nugget, which is just a great way to world build.
And since none of us are going to get out alive and it is about death, I think it's fair to say that this rhythm is going to get you.
It's going to get you every time. That's a clever reference that I'm missing right now, but my brain is kind of fried.
It's actually a musical reference to Gloria Estefan.
See, like I said, it was a reference that I was missing at the time. Oh my God.
Has nothing to do with
I should have actually realized that
rhythm.
The Rhythm of the Night, yes.
No, that is a different song. No, Rhythm is gonna get you. Rhythm is gonna get you.
It's all the same song to me. It's been so many years.
Because you started by saying, there's a certain rhythm to it, and that's what my brain just keyed in on. So I was like, death rhythm.
So getting into the actual Roman death rituals, speaking of a different group of Latins than the people who've sort of come out of them, the Latin peoples today. But I would assume there's probably, especially in the Latin peoples, there are a lot more really tight similarities to some of the Roman traditions than there are in other Christian countries that were occupied by Rome. But the first thing to understand, and I think is important to think about when you're developing a ritual of any kind, but especially a death ritual, is why are they doing it?
It's a good thing to start with.
And essentially the Romans did it really to not tee off the spirit of the dead person, because if they would do that, the person would rise from the underworld and come back as a malicious spirit.
So they're trying to not upset the dead relative, or they're trying to
relative. Yeah.
Okay.
Because if you don't perform the rites, they might come back as a malicious spirit and haunt the family. And they're very family based. So as a culture, so
I did not realize that.
that could be what the thing that causes all of the bad luck for your family. Not the bad decisions. It's because of a spirit that was mistreated. But so you sort of want to keep that in mind. Everything they're really doing is to appease the spirit, because the first part is they prepare the body. And this is very common. We do this today. We send them off to a funeral home and they do it for us. We outsource that, I guess.
It's a funny way to think about it. Yeah, because families don't do it themselves. And you'd think that might be in modern culture, that would, for, certainly most Americans, that would be like a super creepy even thought, the idea of approaching one of your dead relatives and dressing and prepping and cleaning the body, which was perfectly normal and commonplace in many ancient societies.
Yeah. And just as a quick note, if you go to guardduel.com and go to the show notes for this episode, I'm actually going to put a link to a Wikipedia and an encyclopedia that I found articles on, which helped drudge up some of this information and reminded me of some of the stuff, because I remembered the basic flow of it, but there are a lot of the details that those two sites really help flesh in.
You know what? I have a unique resource that I actually have two unique resources that I didn't think that, but I'll ask you, you tell me what you think. I have a really close friend who's a funeral director. So he preps bodies. He goes and picks up bodies. Like, this is right up his, this is his wheelhouse.
Yes.
And he has a fantastic personality. I had him on my other show. He knows how to talk. Would you like to interview him? Would you like to get him on this show to talk about this? We could
do that. I mean, what I would do is I would go talk to him and find out if he feels like he could bring in sort of like unique perspectives to the differences and how
I think that would be up to us.
He probably could, I would assume.
I'm sure he could.
I would just
100%
talk
sure
to him first, but I'm fine with it if he is.
And I have another friend of mine who's actually I don't know if she's done with school yet, but she's in school to be a mortician. So,
okay, well, I think we'd probably do one.
I would say him, not her.
He has the experience. Yes, and so the Romans did some very specific things they did, and there are variations. It's always key to keep in mind. They were a polytheistic religion. They had a standard sort of Roman way of doing things. But they had these things called mystery religions, which we would call cults today. And they also...
I'm sorry, mystery?
Mystery religion. They were called mystery religions. Actually, technically, Christianity was considered one up until the point it overtook the empire. Right. But it was a sort of secret rite types of religions. A lot of them were Greek or from the areas that they conquered. And they were sort of adopted in and worshipped by Romans. So sometimes they would add on to it based off of their conquest. So there could be some variations, but there's a general types of things that happen. One, the closest relative would give the body a last kiss.
You think they were arm wrestled over that, right?
No.
It's me. I'm kissing him. No. I'm kissing him. All of them more. No, all of them more. Sorry.
I think it's the closest relative by the legal definition is supposed to kiss them.
Well, what if he was unmarried and everybody was dead except his 3 children? And then how would they figure that out? Maybe it
would be the oldest male child.
It wouldn't be the youngest?
It would be the oldest male child.
You figured the oldest was probably part of it.
It would be if he was the paterfamilias, it would be the person probably taking his position, even if they weren't technically like it might be a cousin or an adopted child. Because the thing is, especially like if it was the head of the family, the paterfamilias, I would assume, and I could be wrong here, it would be whoever's coming in to take that position. If it's someone else in the family, it would probably, just from what I know of Roman, probably the oldest male directly related to them.
All right, now just to be a pain in the butt, I have to ask, what is paterfamilias? Is that what you said?
It is essentially the father's the head of the household.
Okay.
And literally, it's like most civil law, especially early in the Republican Empire, was literally doled out by the father of the family, not by a civic official. So like if your kid committed a crime, the father would deal with it and punish the child. And even to the point of like exiling or possibly even killing them. It was within the right to kill anyone. And it's an extended family thing. So like if you have like the patriarch of the family, that's kind of where that term comes from. Could literally, his in-laws that lived with him, their children, they were all part of his household.
Right.
And literally if one of them he would be the one to choose whether or not the child was exposed for when they did that type of stuff as well too. He would be the one to determine and hand out punishments. And so I guess you're really nice to your dad in the Roman era.
That wouldn't fly real well these days.
That would not go. But a lot of times the state has kind of taken over that position. Where a lot of the civil crimes are now dealt with through the court systems, and a lot of those before were traditionally not.
All right. The second thing you've got written down here is placed on the ground like at birth, which has got me curious. So what did they do at birth?
So I don't know all of the stuff around birth, but I know once the child was born, one of the first things they would do is place it on the ground. And I believe that was tied to the part where the father would then pick it up, and that would be the proof of legitimacy. That would be him claiming the child as his.
Ah, interesting.
And I don't know if that's exactly. I do know both of those parts existed. I don't know if they were tied together because I didn't really research that. But part of the birth thing was they would place them on the ground, and this is tying it back to birth. They're entering a new state, so they're placing the body on the ground like they're being born, but they're moving to the underworld instead of.
Even if that's not 100% accurate, it's a really cool ritual idea for all the world builders. Like that's an awesome idea. I like that a lot.
And
So when body's dead, last kiss, and then placed on the ground, not in the ground yet. So what would be done at that point?
So then they would purify, sort of wash the body down. Romans were big on their baths. They were
the aqueduct and all.
Ducks. They had ducks.
No, they had ducks.
And then they would anoint it probably in oils and stuff like that. And that would probably vary a little bit region to region on what they specifically anointed them in, but they would purify the body essentially, and then they would anoint it. And there are some examples of Romans embalming, but I don't think there's any evidence that was connected to Egyptian embalming, just very elaborate rituals for the extremely wealthy.
Now, I mean, do we get? There's got to be something here where we get into talking about, because we were you mentioned earlier polytheism, which for those of you not paying attention, that is a multi-god belief system. So you're not just talking about like, oh, Jesus Christ, the one in three, Father and the Son, just one God, or Allah or Buddha. You're talking about a whole bunch of gods. So did they, do the coins on the eyes thing? Like, because I know I've heard about that with the Romans. I've heard about that with Romans and with Greeks.
Yes. It was actually it was one of those mystery religions. So certain Romans would do that. That's one of those like potential changes. They would put a wreath on the head of nobles, and sometimes if they belong to like certain other types of mystery cults, there might be other wreaths that they would lay on them as well too. So there could be lots of little things sort of added to the body at this point after it's been anointed. And as they dress it, preparing it for the funeral.
Do you think that's like a holdover, like some of the modern, because of course you see a lot of in modern religions, you drop a flower on the grave, like on the casket before it's lowered, or even after it's lowered.
Yep. Exactly. I think that's very much a holdover thing. Not the reason why, but the fact that it gets done so much. People still put stuff in the casket sometimes too.
I feel weird about that. Like, I know that that's a big thing for people. They're like, oh, well, dress grandma up in all her favorite jewelry and bury her.
Yeah.
It's
I know.
Why? It's useless. Like, she doesn't need any of that stuff.
I know. It's like when my grandmother died, I actually took my ribbon rack from the service. I put it into her casket because my papa had forbidden anyone to go into the service, and I was the first one to break that. And so, yeah. And so,
I did not know that. You've never shared that before.
This is probably the first time I've shared that, at least publicly. And but it's one of those things where I don't believe there's really a change.
No, we got a segue, or we got a tangent a little there. What was it like for you knowing that he forbid that?
It caught my attention.
Better yet, here's another question, because I don't know if I've ever even asked you this. Why did you join the service in the first place? Was it just to pay for school, or was it just something you wanted to do?
Well, I wanted to protect us from the Soviet threat. It was a sense of patriotism, which is why I joined the service. So that outweighed my deceased grandfather's will. But they brought my grandmother out to tell me that
he had passed at that point before
he had passed. I think 8 years before, 7 or 8 years before.
Okay, but were you aware? You were aware of it when you joined?
Oh, my mom told me they brought my grandmother out to reinforce that Papa had said no.
Wow.
He had told her no when she wanted to go in the Air Force after high school.
Your mother?
My mother directly.
Okay.
He told my uncle no, but from what I had learned after I was in the service, that he actually would have let my uncle go in. But he just wanted him to know his point. But my mom was an absolute no way in hell.
This is the same grandfather who was in which
World War II.
He was in World War II, and he had some pretty significant PTSD.
He had significant PTSD. I know there's a story of him flipping my grandmother onto the ground when he first got home, and she snuck up behind him and grabbed him, and he had ripped her up over his shoulder and threw her to the ground before he realized what was even going on. He saw some pretty significant action in the Pacific. Expected responses. I mean, I never knew that about him. I'd literally watch war movies with the guy, and he would cry watching John Wayne movies, and I never understood that as a child. Like,
that's kind of see how we made a circle there. Like, you talk about the patriarch of the family. That's exactly what occurred right there for you.
That's right. And they're bringing back the dead to lord over me, which was a good tactic. But the thing was, when you're a young kid, you go with what you think is right.
Especially a strong-minded American.
Yeah, that's right.
We're so stubborn.
I definitely fulfill that role.
you more so than many. That's why we get along so well.
That's right.
Takes one to know one.
So back into the Roman ceremony. The last thing that they do is they're putting little things like coins in their mouths, maybe, possibly over the eyes, wreaths all over. But then they dress them according to their status.
Now, of course, from watching tons of movies and all, we generally know that, the coins is for the ferryman, but why don't we explain that for people that might not know?
So essentially, and there's actually another neat one I'll add on too, where the coin was, you could pay the ferryman to cross the river so you could get towards Elysium. It was part of the journey. It was a little journey you would take to get to the underworld. And there's actually another mystery called Orphism.
Slow down. So, because I want to explore this a little bit, and you probably know more. I'm sure you know more about this than I do. I always thought that Elysium was a Valhalla style heaven for warriors.
Kind of.
So you could get there as a normal citizen, or
probably not unless you did something glorious, and not dying as a warrior wasn't good enough.
No.
Dying in battle as a warrior was not good enough. So I guess in a way you could say it was similar, but it was for like your hero level people.
Okay, so your standard level person dies, and you put the coins either on their eyes or in their mouth to pay the ferryman to get across. You said the river. I am aware of the river Styx, is what you're referring to.
Yep.
So you're going across the river Styx. If you're not going to Elysium, then where are you going?
You're going to the rest of the underworld. So
just the generic, the underworld. That's all they call it.
Elysium is a field in the underworld for heroes. So it's where the heroes go to gloriously live out their afterlife. So that's exactly what would happen. And I think everyone had to pay to cross the river. I'm pretty sure. I don't think it was just to get to Elysium, but the goal was you hope to get there to get to Elysium. There was another group, or the Orphism, and they actually had a tablet, which was a passport from Bacchus, which would help them get through the underworld easier. It would actually tell them how to do it.
What would happen if you didn't have the coins? Like if you didn't pay for your loved one? What was the belief? If you didn't pay, what would happen? Would they be like there was? I seem to remember watching some sort of fiction at one point where all the souls were trapped in the river.
I don't think that was true. I could be wrong. I don't really remember that one per se, but I believe you definitely could not cross, and those I think would be the people who would potentially wander back out as they're dead and become malignant spirits. Maybe.
Yeah. All of this, everything that you're hearing, guys, should be giving you ideas. If you don't have things built up for your specific race that's got some cool death stuff going on, but you're not sure what you want to do with it yet, all of this should be spinning your wheels. So don't just be listening to this going, oh, that's neat. Oh, that's nice. Like, take notes, think about, modify, think about what you want to change and what you're going to make appropriate to a race in your world.
Mm-hmm. Now, the next thing that you would do is you would lay in state. And literally that's something that's completely done all over Christianity today. Everyone has a wake or a view, depending on which form of Christianity you are. I think 99% at least of Christianity still has they still have the ceremony.
What's your distinction between a wake and a viewing?
A wake has a mass.
Fair enough.
And that's why Catholics do it, because they have a mass with every time they go into church. So if you have a wake associated with Catholicism, there will be a mass involved with it. A communion for people who don't know exactly what the difference between mass and a normal services. The next thing that they would do is they would take the body in procession. And this is where one of the coolest items comes out. They would come out in a procession. And I don't know if all families did this or if this was just the rich families. They would make these masks. I want to say out of like plaster, but it was probably something else. They're like these white masks of their ancestors. The family would put it over their face as they walked in procession with the body to where they were going to dispose of it.
Interesting.
And then they would give a eulogy where they would talk about the noble deeds. And if you know anything about Shakespeare or if you read history, one of the big things in Mark Antony's famous eulogy, which we don't really know exactly what he said, except it caused the city of Rome to turn on the people who murdered Julius Caesar. But according to Shakespeare, at least, he was like, hey, I'm not here to talk about his noble deeds. And that's very telling, because the specific reason why you do a eulogy is to talk about it. So once he crossed that line there, he was deviating from the script of what an actual Roman ceremony would have been.
Yeah, he was skipping tradition, which is not wise.
And after the eulogy would be done, then they would actually start sacrifices. So like they would make some sacrifices to the dead person as well, too. Because remember, this is all to the dead person. This is to make sure that they don't come back angry. So these, and you might be bribing some gods on the way. I'm sure, depending on how much money you have, would get the maximum number of sacrifices. Like especially like you're an emperor later on, they would you would be taken out to the necropolis and put typically on a funeral pyre. And the Romans were burners. Not always, but usually they would. That'd be ironic. After all of the work they did to prep the body, they would then burn it. And they actually had like these very small places in the city where you'd bring the urns back to. And they were actually set up just like apartment blocks if you were poor. And you'd have more space if you were wealthy. So it was almost like many versions of how Romans lived, where their ashes would then be put back in the city of Rome after they were burned at the stake, which Julius Caesar was burned in the city, and that was another deviation. They were typically burned outside of the city.
Probably because of the smell.
Or there's some religious significance that I don't know of.
Maybe.
And then they would also add epitaphs. And you'll see these even for really poor people. It would typically talk about like when they were alive and what were their deeds if they had any. And, if they left someone they loved, Mr. Man only beat his wife when he deserved it. Was one I heard somewhere. It was like he'd only beat his wife if she deserved it.
How noble of him.
I know. What a peach. My favorite one is, I did not exist. I have not existed. I do not exist. I feel no desire. Was the epitaph from one of them that I found on Wikipedia, which I thought was pretty cool.
That's an interesting one. I think I've told you, I want to say I've read this on the show before, but it's one of my favorite things ever. So I feel it's more than good on this show and on topic to read it again. I'm pretty sure I've told you about what Nick Offerman, in an interview with Maxim, he was asked as a woodworker, would he build his own casket? For those of you that don't know, Nick Offerman plays Ron Swanson on Parks and Recreation. He is a comedian, he's a writer, an actor,
and a carpenter apparently.
And he is a master woodworker. And the character on the show is hilarious, but there's a lot of things that he has in common with the character on the show. So Maxim, they asked him, they're like, you're a master woodworker. Would you make your own casket? He said, in a manner of speaking, I shall construct my own elvish warcraft, in which I'll undergo a magnificent Viking funeral. My loved ones and friends will frolic around a ceremonial pyre on an oceanfront cliff, making music and love and merry as my death ship sails towards the setting sun. As it nears the extreme range of a longbow, Chris Pratt, who is also on Parks and Rec, and they are friends, Chris Pratt will light a large flaming arrow from the pyre, knock the arrow in his string, draw the bow taut, and with a mighty heave, then loose it in a long, majestic arc of fire and smoke until impossibly its tooth is ensnared dart-like in the mainsail of my barbecue, emulating the entire boat in a frenzy of roaring conflagration. I know I'm still saying that word wrong. Until the funerary blaze descends, hissing smoke into the welcoming arms of Mother Pacifica. And the follow-up question was, and are people saying anything over the cabinet? over the casket? He's like, yeah. They're looking at Chris and saying, nice fucking shot, Chris.
I think at this point I would probably think of Guardians of the Galaxy for him, but maybe
right. I'm looking forward to seeing his Viking elven longboat. That is a rather hefty undertaking to build, but he could do it. He has actually built boats, and Dave Letterman actually asked him if he would build him a boat.
Oh wow! So actual probably sailing yachts.
No, like a canoe or like a kayak.
Oh, smaller ones. Okay.
Yes, which a friend of mine built the type of strip, like cedar strip canoe that he was talking about, and the same friend also built kayaks. Again, a master woodworker. Mm-hmm. And man, you should have seen his work. His boats were unbelievable, but took a considerable amount of time and effort to make. Like, I was around while he built one of the canoes. I mean, it took months.
Well, that's very cool. No, I've never built anything outside like a website. Okay.
You've built worlds, Jeffrey. I
built worlds. That's true. Yes, I build nothing in reality. Just things Clipper nets or in my brain.
Some of them take just as long in both things. So after the epitaphs, after all of that, now was there any tradition of people writing their own prior to?
Not that I know of.
Not that you're aware of.
Not that I'm aware of. I'm sure there were probably some Romans were big on wills, so I'm sure some of them had them in their wills, especially the more egocentric ones.
Sure.
I'm sure Julius Caesar's was pre-written.
I plan to be at my own. Like, I want a party. Like, I want a big party that I will pay for. Like, I want to tell Sarah ahead of time, I got a lot of life insurance. I want a good chunk of change put aside and have a huge party in my name and celebrate my life. And I intend, if I have any foresight, to record a video ahead of time to say goodbye to everybody. It'd be like at my own death party.
So long, suckers.
Not exactly, but you get the picture.
I get the picture. But then we're almost done with the actual Roman wedding now. There's one more major thing that has to happen.
Wedding?
I'm sorry. Funeral. And that would be 9 days after the funeral. There would be a feast in honor of the dead.
Perfect. Yeah. Right in line with what I want to do.
And I don't think this is still, I know Catholics typically have receptions after their funeral, and I've been to ones for non-Catholic weddings as well too. I don't know how common that one is, but that one's still kind of around. You have a reception afterwards.
Yeah, very common.
you're supposed to talk about the person and what they've done and what they've accomplished and what they mean for the family. And the Romans, would have that festival that would start 9 days after. I'm sure if they were really wealthy, it would probably stretch out a bit from there. But if they were poor, they would have some meat in that meal or something, I guess. But now
I'm big on the death party. I like that.
There are two other sort of important things to think about too. Beyond the funerals, they had two major festivals that were, and I'm going to try and actually say them. So I apologize to anyone who knows Latin. And these happened at the same time. I think it was like around the Ides of March. So like from the Ides of February to around the Ides of March, somewhere around there. And they were back to back. One was Parentalia, which is probably completely nowhere close to the proper way of saying that.
I think that'd be like Parentalia.
Parentalia. That sounds much more fluid. So that's probably correct. And that one was really, it was celebrating the family, but it's not just the living members, because with Rome, it was not only the gods, it was the spirits of their ancestors, which helped protect the household. So you have to be good to those people, even after they pass. So you would have this festival once a year where you would celebrate the person or all of the people who've passed in your family and your family. I think your entire family got celebrated as well too. Just all of the members. It would be sort of like, and literally like Rome would shut down for this. Like you couldn't get ceremonies. There was no official business outside of the war that they were probably in somewhere. But the people who were left behind, they had a party. And then there was Feralia, which would come right afterwards, which that's the one where they're trying to suck up to the ones that are maybe pissed off. They've not quite made it back yet, or maybe they're back and they wanted to get rid of them. But that was one that was like, I think you just sort of would give sacrifices to try and get them to not be malicious anymore, or to make sure that none of them became malicious. And that was more strictly the dead in that one. But it was kind of like back to back, so you call it one long festival, but they had two different names for it.
I think I like this idea of like just having a party to celebrate the living, though. I think this is something that I need to start embracing. I think I'm gonna fund one of these.
Yeah, I think they call those parties.
Well, I know, but I'm not just talking like just have a party, but have something that acknowledges people, that genuinely puts a point about, you are living, enjoy your life, be a good person, so on and so forth.
Yeah. Well, I think they're going to emphasize, I think that ceremony still goes on today. Not consistently, not annually, but we call them family reunions now.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And my family hasn't had one in specifically. I remember going to a family reunion for my family when I was 10, 12, maybe.
Yep.
So you're talking a good 32 years ago. No one's really had. The closest we've had is when my grandfather died. Like everybody under the sun was there. So
a lot of times, like my family, I don't think they've had receptions after funerals, but the family would always get together. And unfortunately, sometimes those sort of piggyback. And you say you typically only end up seeing people, and that I think that's because the family structure isn't as strong as it used to be.
Yeah,
where the family literally like lived together. A lot of times in the same house or really close to each other, where now, it's very common that people go away to college and don't come back, or they live, but it's not as, since you don't really have the one person running everyone's lives like you did in the Roman world,
right?
The families have broken off because they're more separate than they ever have been.
Yeah. When my grandfather passed, it was a massive, massive funeral. It was huge. And then afterward, we went back to his VFW, and it was a huge party. Like the funeral was really sad. The funeral was hard. And when we got back, everyone got lit and just had a great time. Like, I think he would have been.
That's my thought is, enjoy yourself. If you want to mourn me, once you get afterwards, have fun.
Yeah.
Because you still have life to live. Is sort of my own opinion there. But, I think the world builder task for today, because I didn't actually have any written down, is pretty obvious.
Create a funeral pyre. Plan your own funeral.
No, that might be the real world task. The world.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's probably fair.
Is going to be much more subtle and difficult to guess, which is take one of the elements we talked about today, or take one of the areas that we're talking about and develop that for one of the cultures in your world. You know, if baths aren't a big thing, they might not have the same way to purify a body. So, come up with something to replace that. Come up with things that are culturally appropriate to your cultures to work in, and you don't need even all of the steps. Pick the steps that you think would be relevant. Have a reason why they have the ceremony. Is it to appease a god? Is it to give the god a reason to let them in? Is it just to celebrate their life? Whatever it is, come up with a ritual for one of your cultures in your world.
Maybe a sand bath. I'm reminded of in Pitch Black when Iman reached into the sand and he's rubbing the sand all over his hands as though it was water to kind of clean his hands off. You kind of, you figure sand is abrasive. It's going to exfoliate the skin. So maybe they don't wash the body off per se, but they rub sand on it. And I also love the whole bit about placing the birth ritual of placing the baby on the ground and then picking the baby up. I really think that's cool. So it doesn't have to be a death thing. If you guys pick something out of there you want to turn into a birth thing.
And remember, sometimes it's simple, and go back to last episode too. If you're looking for some extremes or different ways that people do it, if you don't want to have them burned, remember, there are other ways. Just go back one episode, listen to that again, or look at the show notes.
I think the focus on the prior episode was eating the bodies, was family.
Actually, I think that was 3 episodes ago. Because I think we haven't released these yet, so sometimes we get confused. I think we had Jim's 2 interview episodes in between.
Oh, okay.
So the last worldbuilding episode.
So what's the real world task?
The real world task is to create a Viking longship.
That is a great one. And feel free to get a hold of other members of our community. You guys could work on it together because that is a big task. It should be Elven. You could go Dwarven, but it should be Elven. If you want to join the community, go to gardul.com. No, I'm a dirty liar. Go to facebook.com/group/Undercroft. Is that about right?
/group/Undercroft. That is correct.
Yes.
And I believe I don't remember the shortcut. There is a gardul.com/ it's either Undercroft or Facebook. I think it's Undercroft.
I always tell people, just look for Undercroft and you'll find us.
We're not the band.
Yes. There's a band. There's an Undercroft band.
Yeah, I saw it last time I was searching for their group.
That must be new because I don't remember that previously during my looks around for it. But thanks for listening, guys, and we will catch you on the next one.
Thank you so much for listening to the Worldbuilders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the Worldbuilders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.gardul.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.